Slides. Thank you very much. I said this yesterday, but I'll say it again today. It's a huge privilege for me to be here, and it's been wonderful meeting some of you lovely people that I've interacted with online, some of you that I hadn't met before. And if yesterday is anything to go by, we're in for a real treat today of just finding out amazing ways that you're using R to improve life within the NHS and for the patients. And as a patient, I would just like to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing. So I'm talking to you this morning about colour schemes for your plots. I like a good punny title if I can come up with one. I'm Cara Thompson, and I'm a freelance data consultant specialising in enhanced reproducible reports, reproducible outputs and data viz. And what I mean by that is getting you very easily from your data to something that looks nice and polished, saving you some time in the process, but also helping your end users engage well with the outcomes of what you've been looking at. The thing that drives me in all of this is maximising the impact of other people's expertise. There's so much expertise in this room, and it's just been wonderful seeing the way that you're showcasing it here and inspiring each other with what you can do with R. And today I'm going to give you 5 tips for creating and applying bespoke colour schemes to your plots. Similar to yesterday, it's going to be quite a visual talk and a bit of a whirlwind, but all the code and all the slides are available on my website at the link at the bottom, and I'll make sure that I link it from the NHS-R site as well. But before I give you these 5 tips, I'm going to ask you to take a moment and please suspend all disbelief and follow me in an adventure about what the Palmer Penguins got up to last weekend. Last weekend, the Palmer Penguins decided that they would run a baking competition. And they decided that they would pit the species against each other and choose different conditions to work in. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to watch with me this episode of the Great Penguin Bake Off, and we're going to try and plot our way through it. So the penguins went on a bit of an adventure. And I'm just going to steal the theme that we created in our presentation yesterday. If you weren't here yesterday, you can catch up with that again at the link on the slides. So they went on a bit of an adventure. They had different conditions in which they were baking. Some of them were given underripe bananas, some of them were given ripe bananas, and some of them were given overripe bananas. Now, I haven't added a legend here, but you can probably guess which species was given what. Those of you who've seen my talks before might think, here she goes again. Yes, but actually I've taken it a little bit further this time around. They were allowed to go on a retreat to plan their bakes, and they chose different locations. So some of them went on a city break in Paris, the others went to the countryside, and the other group decided that they would go on a ski resort. They were allowed to invite a different mentor along with them. So we've got Paul Hollywood, Prue Leith, Mary Berry, blast from the past, a goodie to have on your side, I think, if you're going to try and bake anything. And they were allowed to choose a different type of snack that they could have between their bakes. Some of them chose a tin of sardines, we got some sushi, and we got some fish and chips in the mix as well. And finally, the Adelie Penguins, they were not sure about this underripe banana business, so they decided that they would try and vary the amount of banana in their mix. And again, you can try and figure out which ones you think chose to add more banana to their mix. Now, before you think I've totally lost the plot, pun absolutely intended, that is not the case. All I'm trying to do here is illustrate the first of my 5 tips, which is to try and use colour purposefully. So using colour purposefully, it's not about making it a guessing game, it's about making it easier for the readers to remember what is what. Once you've clocked that the fish and chips are the orange and yellow bar, you don't really need to look at the legend again. You will remember that as you look through the rest of the plots. So if at all possible, try to do this in your own context. Now, you're probably thinking, I'm not actually doing research about baking penguins. Probably that's a good thing. So let me give you an example from the real world. I've been working on a project with some clients in academia who had looked at video ratings as to how trustworthy they were based on whether they were semi-automated, fully automated, or human-made. If you Google images of artificial intelligence, you often find a kind of bluey grey background for the machiney type stuff, and then a pinky orange thing to do with the human brain somewhere. So I went with that, and if nothing else, it gave me a wee bit of a chuckle. I'm thinking about hopefully the plot's not being evil and twisted, but us getting something useful out of it. I also did this yesterday in the themes plot. Here's what we had from the tooth growth data set, which is one of the inbuilt data sets that you find in R that you can use to just make some crazy plots. As the drug dose or the amount of vitamin C increases, the colour gets darker, and that's quite a nice way of encoding that as well for your readers. And as I said, it's not about guessing, but if I show you this plot without really thinking about it, you can see immediately that the green bananas did not fare well in the yumminess rating, which is along the y-axis. So it's all about making it easy for you to extract information from the plots. Tip number 2, let others help you. I'm going to let you in on a secret here. I find picking colours actually quite tricky, but thankfully there are others who can help. I think we all like to talk about others needing to rely on experts where they need input from experts, and I think we can fall into the trap of thinking that we know how to do everything. We don't. There are people who are much better at colours than we are, and so let's go and get some help from them. You might have some department brand guidelines that you can fall back on, in which case that's great, go and use those. My favourite thing to do is start from a photo and use something like imagecolorpicker.com to pick out specific colours from it. If you like the look of the photo, you're probably going to find some colours within that will work quite well together. Here are the photos that I used to create our Palmer Penguins adventure. And here's a plot that I made recently using data from the Bake-Off. Not that I'm obsessed with the Bake-Off at all, but I told the tech guys that there would be a fun plot for them to see. This is entirely made in R, and the colour palette comes from Prue's shirt. I just thought if a fashion designer's gone to the trouble of making a shirt that looks nice, why not try and reuse some of those colours in a plot? Here we've got the colour scheme that I was talking about earlier for the artificial intelligence stuff and the human brain, which comes from this image here. The bananas, just a set of bananas, why not? If you can go literal, go literal. I also encourage you to take inspiration from art and data visualizations that you like. I was recently at the Leon Morocco exhibition in Edinburgh and was absolutely fascinated by his use of colour. And I'm still trying to figure out how I can try and emulate that in some data viz. So look around you, go to the art galleries if you have a chance to do that, and try and learn from people who are experts at these things. The other thing you can do is Google whatever you like palette. I gave that a go yesterday. Turns out there is a Birmingham colour palette. There we go. Who knew that? So you can use that, but if you Google, sunflower palette or flamingos or whatever it is that you fancy, someone will have gone to the trouble of putting together a nice colour scheme that you can then build on. Or you can start from the colour wheel and read around how best to use it. So there's a tool that I'm going to try and show you here called Palatable, which makes it easy. So you can plug in how many colours you need. Probably not that clear on that screen actually, but you can choose the number of colours that you want up here, and then you can grab the wheel and move it around. And it turns out, if you make your colours slightly less spaced out, you end up with slightly nicer palettes to work with. So worth a shot, quite a useful tool that I would encourage you to have a play around with. Tip number 3, apply your colours using a named vector. This is one of these coding gotchas that you fall into if you're not careful. So let's have a look at a basic version of our banana penguins plot. And here the easy fix, the quick fix, is to just plug your colour values into Scale Colour Manual. Brilliant. There we go, we've got our colours in. Now, the trouble is, say you've gone on holiday and some keen bean in your department has decided to fix your data for you in your absence and say, actually, the species should have been a factor and it should have been an ordered factor. I've just fixed that for you. And you come back to keep your eyes on the plot. The dots are moving around in terms of the colours. What's going on here? What's going on is that the order in which the colour values are applied has changed. So it was applied previously alphabetically, and now it's being applied in terms of the order of the factor. The way to avoid that happening, because you do not want this to happen in your own projects, is to use a named vector, and then you plug that into your plot code at a later stage, and then however much your keen bean wants to reorder your factors, you're still fine. Everything is safe. Key advantages, you know the colours are applied to the right data points, you keep your colour data pairings correct throughout your whole project, you can package it up as a default palette as well. You can reuse colours in the text, and if you want to find out how to do that, have a look at the workshop that I did a couple of weeks ago for this conference online. Fourth tip is to check for accessibility, and that's really important. We want to make sure that the visualizations that we create are accessible to people, regardless of differences in visual perception. I'm not an expert at this, but there are other people who are, so again, let's make use of that. There's a brilliant package called Colorbinder that was created for us within the R community that we can use to just check what our plots look like to people who have different types of visual colour perception, and also to see what it looks like if you print it in black and white, which I think is actually really useful for our context. So let's just call our banana plot back up. This is what it is here. And then all you need to do is call this line of code up here, and it will give you a grid with how your plot looks to people who've got different types of visual perception. I think the desaturated one is also really useful if you work in a context where people tend to print their stuff out in black and white, because then you can see whether your plot still works for them as well. So have a look at that package. It's actually really useful. The easy way to get a palette that works like that is to go from darker colors to lighter colors, or from lighter colors to dark colors, whatever works for you. Make sure you've got a mix in that. If you choose them all the same kind of darkness, then obviously when you desaturate it, it's not going to work. A few helpful resources for doing that. To find colors, you can use My Color Space. You just give it a color and you hit go, and it gives you a palette that goes from a darker color to a lighter color, which is really good. You can test your color palettes at this website, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And you can also test the contrast of your text against the color. So if you're using text boxes that have got a colored background, it's worth making sure that that all works as well. Final thing, make use of interpolation, and this answers the question that we were talking about yesterday with one of our colleagues. What if you don't know how many colors you've got to use, and you want to create a consistent palette across your plot? One thing that you can do is create a vector that has more colors than you're going to need, and get R to pick between them to maximize distance. The trouble with that is that it just picks them literally in order that you've given, and it just tries to maximize it across the vector. So it will pick number 1, number 5, and number 9. You don't always end up with the nicest color combinations if you do that. So instead, I would encourage you to pick 2 or 3 anchor colors and then let R interpolate between them. There are some really sophisticated ways of doing that I'm not going to cover just now, but the color ramp palette will do a good job for that. So here we have our plot, and we know that we need 9 colors because I've modified the data, and we've just given it green, blue, and purple at the top to see how we get on with that. Let's try and improve on that. Going back to this image, I've used image color picker, and then I used this palette checker here to pick out some image from this, and we feed that in to our anchor colors. I fed in a kind of mustard yellow, a pink, and a purple, and we end up with this. This is just with 3 different colors. And here we've got it with 9 colors. Again, probably quite difficult to see on this plot, but you can have a play around, and it's nice that it just creates the number of colors that you need and keeps it all fairly consistent. Last thing to say, there are only so many colors you can use in a plot, so try a different approach if you've got too many. Maybe you could facet your data, or you could try using different shapes. I did that for exam analysis, where we looked at how candidates performed in different bits of the syllabus. There were too many bits of the syllabus to have colors, so we used a letter for the data points for that. Or you can use emoji, and I feel like this is an appropriate point to share the silliest plot I've ever created, all done in R using GG Animate, and you can use emojis for your data points, which, you know, who knows, why not? There's so much more that we could talk about. Packaging up your colors for easy reuse, creating your own scale. We could create a scale NHS demo color with the Birmingham palette if we wanted to, basing your dark text color on the central color in your plots, but we're gonna have to talk about that some other time. So I'll just close off and remind you of these 5 tips. Use your colors purposefully, let others help you, apply color using a name vector, check for accessibility, and make use of color interpolation. Happy plotting.